Hi, budding structural engineers. Welcome to the structural engineering lectures on advanced steel designs. In the previous class, we have seen fundamentals and classifications, etc. In today's class, we shall see the designs of transmission line towers conforming to IS 802, Part 1, Section 1, 1995, which deals with materials, loads, and permissible stresses. Section 1, it deals with materials and loads, and IS 802 Part 1 Section 2, which deals with permissible stresses. IS 802 Part 3 1978, which deals with fabrication, galvanizing, inspection and packing, and IS 802 Part 3 1978, which deals with testing. Right. I hope, student, you are understanding the discussions, right? Then let us move to the codal specifications, right? This is how I am now referring to IS 802 Part 1, Section 1, 1995, which is the Indian Standard Code for use of structural steel in overhead transmission line towers. Code of practice. Part 1, materials, loads and permissible stresses. Section 1, materials and loads, right? Now, let us see this, right? I'll just explain the very important discussions on this, right? We do have the different terminologies: return period, reliability, security, safety. You just go through this, right? uh, Here, let me take these definitions very quickly. The reliability of a transmission line system is the probability that a system would perform its function or task under the designed load conditions for a specified period. That is what referred to as the reliability, right? And also, what is the security? Means the ability of the system to be protected from any major collapse, such as a cascading effect, or if that failure is triggered by a given component, right? Then that is what referred to as a security. Whereas the safety means the ability of the system not to cause human injury or loss of life, right? That is how, from these 3 points of view, means the loads are also given in terms of the loads corresponding to reliability, security and safety, right? Even what type of structural steel should be used. Now code says that either they should be adhering to IS 2062 and IS 8500 8500, and bolts that which you are using should be conforming to IS 12427 for the class 4.6 grade bolts are IS 6639, right? Whereas for high tension grip bolts, HSFG bolts, they should be conforming to IS 8500, and as well as they should be conforming to IS 3757 for the class 8.8 grade bolts, right? Even for the foundation bolts, they should be conforming to IS 5624, and for step bolts, they should be conforming to IS 10238. That is all the different codal specifications for bolts. As well as for the nuts, we do have IS 1363 Part 3, as well as Part 6 of the same code, and 12427, and also high strength nuts conforming to IS 6623, and the washers will also be used. They should be conforming to IS 2016 and 6610. For spring washers, they should be conforming to 3063 of type B. 3063, that is all the codal specifications, and as well as they should also be conforming to high strength bolts and nuts should be conforming to IS 6694. And generally we'll be doing the galvanization process, that for these towers and for these washers, etc., then it should be conforming to IS 4759. Whereas for the threaded fasteners, that galvanization should conform to according to IS 1367 Part 13, and for the spring washers, it should conform to IS 4759 for the grade 4, whereas for grade 3 it should conform to IS 1573, right? That is how the different codes that are referred once again in this IS 802, IS 802 part 1 section 1. Section 1. Now let us see the types of tower, student. This we already discussed. These are the suspension towers. Suspension towers like this, right? Where we do have I or V suspension insulating strings, where the tangent towers with 0 degree with the suspension strings to be used on straight runs only, whereas intermediate towers 0 to 2 degrees with suspension strings to be used on straight runs or up to 2 degree line deviation only, or light angle towers 0 to 5 to be used on straight runs up to 5 degree deviation only, right? Like this, right? This, right? This is how the V suspension towers, right? Now coming to the top, the other discussion, student, right? We do have the tension towers already discussed that tension towers like this, uh, tension towers like this, where, right, like this, the tension towers, this is what the tension tower, right? Or alternatively, this is also the tension tower, right? Either of the two is true, both are the tension tower. There is all the deviation, right? This cable, this power connector should have gone in this longitudinal direction, but there is a deviation, therefore there is a, that is what angle of deviation. Now there is all the deviation, angle of deviation. If this angle of deviation is less than uh, uh, in the range of 0 to 15 degrees, then they are what referred to as small angle towers with tension strings, right? This is how, these are what the tension strings, students, right? These are the tension strings only. These are not the cable suspension strings as you have seen in the suspension towers, right? Then the first one is small angle towers to be, if the angle of deviation is between 0 to 15 degrees, and if the angle of deviation is between 0 to 30 degrees, then they are what referred to as medium angle towers. And if the angle of deviation is between 30 to 60 degrees, then they are what referred to as large angle towers, right? And if the angle is more than 60 degrees, then they are what referred to as dead end towers, or they are sometimes referred to as terminal towers or anchor towers. Anchor towers means almost from that tower onward only the power conductors will be starting. Power conductors will be starting, right? And they will be totally taking almost more than 60 degrees or 90 degrees, right? As appropriate, right? And large angle towers and dead end towers with tension strings, right? To be used with deviations 30 to 60 degrees are for dead ends. Dead ends means there is a dead end, there onwards only they will be starting, right? Now next one is the reliability considerations, right? Just now we have seen the definitions, what is reliability, right? Right now we do have the return period in terms of the years, which is a function of the climatic wind loads, right? The minimum yearly reliability PS corresponding to a return time period of T is given by PS is equal to 1 minus 1 by 2T, students, right? Where these reliability levels are now given like this, right? Level 1, level 2, level 3, right? Whereas what is that level 1? Reliability level 1 shall be adopted for electrical high voltage transmission line towers up to 400 kilowatts class, right? Kilo voltage, right? Kilo voltage, right? And whereas reliability level 2 shall be adopted for EHV transmission line towers above 400 kilo volts class, right? And even triple or quadruple circuit towers up to 400 kilovolt lines shall be designed corresponding to reliability level 2 only, and reliability 3 level shall be adopted for tall river crossing towers and special towers, right? That are, though they are not covered in this standard, right? Therefore, there is the three reliability levels, students, right, for which the written period is given in this table 1, right? As well as there the reliability levels, right? There is for level 1, the return period is 50 years. For reliability 2, the return period is 150 years, large, almost 3 times. For reliability level 3, now you can see 500, right? Whereas for reliability 1, it is only 50. Therefore, reliability 3 is 10 times more. 10 times more. Accordingly, the yearly reliability value, right, that is 1 minus 10 to the power minus 2, right? Minus 2 means 1 minus 0.01 means 0.99, right, for reliability level 1. Whereas for reliability level 2, that yearly reliability is 1 minus 1 minus 10 to the power minus 2.5. Whereas for reliability 3, this is 1 minus 10 to the power minus 3 means 0.999, means out of 1999, only 1% out of 1000, right? Compared to that of this previously 1 out of 100, this is now 1 out of 1000, right? That is how the reliability levels for transmission line towers, right? Now, once we see these, let us move to the wind effect, students, right? That is how the basic wind VB is given, and all here water that is discussed is applicable at a 10-meter height. These basic wind speeds, and more than 10 meters means you need to refer to the IS 875 part 3 wind load, right? And all these are worked out for a return period of 50 years only. 50 years only as per IS 875 part 3 1987. Now we have the new version of IS 875 part 3 wind loads as 2015 version, right? Now there the basic wind speeds are given for 6 wind zones, right? That is how the wind zone 1 is having wind speed in terms of meter per second 33, wind zone 2 39, 3, 44, 4, 47, 5, 50, 6, 55, right? Like this, even now I will have the meteorological reference wind speed VR given by VR is equal to VB divided by K naught, right? What is this? VR means it is extreme value of the wind over an average period of 10 minutes duration. It is extreme value of the wind over an average period of 10 minutes, right? Generally, the wind data is given for every 3 seconds, right? That is now we will be doing the averaging, right? VR is equal to VB divided by K naught, where K naught is a factor to convert this 3 seconds peak gust speed into average speed wind duration of 10 minutes at a level of 10 meters above the ground level, right? Therefore, that is how generally this K naught is taken as 1.375. 1.375 means 1 means 100%, more than 100% means 1.3 means 37.5% more than 1 unity, 1.375. If I divide with that, I'll get the meteorological reference wind speed, right? Then what is that next heading is the design wind speed VD is now given by this risk coefficient. It will be obtained using this risk coefficient K1 rotated by K1 and terrain and roughness coefficient K2. Therefore, that VD is given by VR, that meteorological reference wind speed VR multiplied by these two coefficients K1 and K2, where K1 is the risk coefficient, and for different wind zones, for different reliability levels, 1, 2, 3, the risk coefficient is given in this table 2, right? For example, for reliability level 2, for the right for uh, for example, right, for wind zone, for wind zone, now I am having, say, Hyderabad is there in wind zone 4, sorry, wind zone 3, right, 44 meter, right, wind zone 3, right, therefore I do have 1.1. Hyderabad is located in wind zone 3 with 44 meter per second. Therefore, overall, it is a normal tower 1 only, right? Whereas if it is reliability level is 2 means 11 percentage extra. Whereas the same with reliability 3, almost 25 percentage extra compared to that of this 1 unity. That is how, as reliability increases, the value of this risk coefficient will also increase. That is how you can see, as I move the downward direction, all these are much more than that of this first row. Right? That is what the inference from this table, students. Right? I hope you're understanding these discussions. And the next one is the terrain roughness coefficient K2. K2 is now is given in this table 3. However, what are the terrain categories? They are now divided into 3 categories. Right? The category 1, which is exposed open terrain with few or no obstructions, having the obstructions of the objects whose heights are less than 1.5 meter. Then that is what terrain category 1. Whereas terrain category 2 means open terrain with well scattered obstructions having height in the range of 1.5 to 10 meters, then category 2. Whereas category 3 is a terrain with numerous closely spaced obstructions. Right? This is generally this includes well built up areas in the city central areas as are the forest areas, either of the two, right? Either of the two, students, right? Then next one is now I do have this from this I do have this coefficient K2 for terrain category 1 1.08, whereas for the terrain category 2 1, whereas for terrain category 0.3 0.85. Therefore I do have K1 and K2. Now I can calculate that VD. Once I calculate that VD, then I can calculate the design wind pressure PD given by 0.6 VD square, where PD is the design wind pressure in terms of Newton per meter square and VD is the design wind speed in meter per second. That the previous step we already calculated what is VD given by this formula. VR multiplied by K1 multiplied by K2. Right? Therefore, once I get this, then what are the wind loads? Then let us move to the next subheading as the wind loads. I hope students you are understanding these discussions, right? We are there in the loads part, right? Wind load on tower, right? Now, however, now you can see that if I calculate using this formula, PD is equal to 0.6 VD square for different categories, category 1, 2, 3 and different categories, terrain categories 1, 2, 3 and for different wind zones 1 to 6. Now for different reliability levels 1, 2, 3. Now that is how the wind pressures will work out in terms of Newton per meter square. Let us say, for example, right, reliability level 1, the terrain category 2 with say Hyderabad, right, 614, right. Hyderabad is wind zone 3, right, 614 Newton per meter square. If at all, that is reliability 1. Whereas the same Hyderabad with reliability 2, the terrain category 2, I am there in the terrain category 2. Now it increases from 614 to 757 Newton per meter square. Whereas for reliability 3, it will increase further to 960. Now you can see almost compared to that of the reliability 1 to reliability 3, almost 50% more design wind pressure is there. Like that, even you can see for any other, this is also approximately these are 50%, around 50% here and there, right? Here and there, 50%, right? Then once I examine this, now let us see the wind loads on the towers. Right? And now for lattice towers of square sections, right? Lattice towers of the square section, the resultant wind load FWT newtons for wind normal to the longitudinal force on the tower is now given by this, right? Now I'll come to this, right? This is how the entire India is divided into the different wind zones 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 with the basic wind speeds starting from 33 dash dash up to the last one, right? 55 meter per second along the coastal zones, right? This one, right? This is 55, right? One less, right? Next zone, right? Fifth zone, right? This is how the next fourth zone and third zone, so on and so forth, right? Corresponding to which the basic wind speeds are given. Now, what is this force? Force on this at a panel height h, right? Now we are there in the wind forces, students, right? That is how the wind load on the tower FWT is given by this formula. The formula PD CDT multiplied by AE multiplied by GT, where PD is the design wind pressure in Newton per meter square and CDT is the drag coefficient per panel under the consideration against which the wind is blowing. CDT value is different for different solidity ratio and as given in the table 5. Now we will see this, right? Therefore, drag coefficient CDT, if the solidity ratio is up to 0.05, then drag coefficient is equal to 3.5, and if solidity ratio is 0.1, this is 3.4, so on and so forth. Greater than equal to 0.5 or greater than 0.5 solidity ratio, then that value drag coefficient is equal to 2. That is how the drag coefficient from table 5. And next, however, what is solidity ratio is defined as the effective area, projected area of the individual elements of frame normal to the wind direction divided by area of the enclosed by the boundary of the frame normal to the wind. That is what referred to as the solidity ratio. The solidity ratio, right? Then, and where A is the total net exposed area of the legs as well as bracings and cross arms, etc. All other panel members and projections, etc. put together in meter square. And GT is the gust response factor, GT, right? Peculiar to the ground roughness, and it depends upon the height above the ground also. That GT value is given in this table 6. Table 6 for insulators as well as for towers. For towers it is referred to as GT, for insulators it is referred to as GI, right? Therefore, the height up to 10 meters, right? Up to 10 meters, then terrain category 1, 2, 3. We do have 1.7, 1.9, 2.55 respectively, so on and so forth. If the height is 80 meter, I do have 2.31, 2.69 and 3.58. That is how the gust response factor for the towers as well as the insulators. Once I get this, then you can calculate the wind load on the tower, right? Lattice tower, right? Whereas if I have the other component, let us see the wind loads on the conductors and ground wire, right? Then that is how FWC is given by PD, CDC, LDGC, right? Where now you can see PD is the design wind pressure in Newton per meter square and CDC is the drag coefficient taken as 1 for conductor and for power conductor and 1.2 for the ground wire, right? And L is the wind span, being the sum of the half of the span on either side of the supporting points that I already explained in the previous section. And D is the diameter of this cable. In meters, right? And GT is the gust response factor, which shall be taken from this table 7, right? Table 7, right? Now we will go to the table 7, student, right? That is how the values of the gust response factor for conductors and ground wires, right? Terrain category 1, 2, 3, we already seen that, right? The height starting from 10 to 80 meters, that already told, right? Now, if I do have up to the values of GC for ruling spans, right? If that wind span is up to 200 meters, right? if that wind span is just 200 meters, then let us say if the height above the ground is 10 meter for terrain category 1, then that uh, gust response factor is equal to 1.7, whereas if that wind span is equal to 300 meters, then that will decrease to 1.65. Likewise, so on and so forth. If that wind span is 800 or above, then that gust factor will reduce to 1.47 from 1.7, which is applicable for 200 meters up to less than or equal to 200 meters. Then the gust factor will be more, 1.7, like this, right? Whereas for 800 that gust response factor GC is less, 1.47 only, 1.47 only, right? Like that, you please see this table. This table gives exhaustive values for different terrain categories, for different wind spans, right, up to 80 meters, right? Now next, this is how this is a schematic of a tower that we already seen, right? This figure we already seen in the form of a photograph. I already explained what is this. This is a beam, right? This is a window part, this is a K frame, etc. That we already explained in the starting discussions, right? Starting discussion. That's how the geometry is shown. Now next one is the wind load on the insulator strings is now notated by FWL, load on the strings, insulator strings, right? I FWI, insulator strings, is given by CD1 multiplied by PD multiplied by A1 multiplied by G1, where CD1 is the drag coefficient to be taken as 1.2, and PD is the design wind pressure in terms of Newton per meter square, and AI is the area of this insulator, which is 50% of the area of the insulator string projected to plane, which is parallel to the longitudinal direction of the string, and G1 is a gust response factor peculiar to that, means that depends upon the roughness and also the height of this insulator attachment point above the ground level. However, this value shall be taken from table 6 that we already discussed, right? Whereas for multiple string including V strings, no masking effect shall be considered. Now that is how the wind loads on the tower, one tower, on as well as that of the power conductor and the strings, right? Now coming to that of the other load, the other loads are temperature effects, right? The absolute maximum and minimum temperature which may be expected in the different localities of the country are indicated in this figure 3 and figure 4 respectively of this IS 802, or alternatively they are also available in IS 800 1984 working stress design code, right? IS 800 1984 in the appendix also, either of the two. Now we'll refer this code itself, right? They are given in this figure 3 and 4, like this, right? Now this is how that figure 3, students, right, which is indicating the chart showing the highest maximum temperature isopleths, right? Now that is how we are there in Hyderabad, therefore that is how Hyderabad, right, it is having an isopleth of 45, right, maximum isopleth of 45, and this minimum of 42.5 degree 45 point degree temperature, degree centigrade, I am sorry, right? Therefore this Hyderabad, from the meteorological department, we do have this information of isopleths maximum 45 degree centigrade to minimum of 42.5 degree centigrade. I am saying for Hyderabad. Like that, you please see for other locations, for other sites across the length and breadth of this India, which is given by this Indian Meteorological Department based upon the data up to 1958. The temperature isopleths in terms of degree centigrade showing the maximum highest temperatures. Similarly we do have figure 3 where it is showing the lowest minimum temperatures like this, right? Figure 4, showing the lowest minimum temperatures isoplex, right? Hyderabad once again, right, is having a minimum of this one, right? 2 point sorry, this isoplex having 2.5 to next one is this isoplex, right? This isoplex, which which is 7.5, right, like this, right? That is how the isoplates shall be referred. Sorry, the minimum is 5 degrees centigrade and maximum is 7.5, because adjoining are 2.5 variations, right? I'm sorry, student, right? That is how the minimum isoplates shall also be referred, right? Once I know what is that minimum and maximum temperatures, then now I'll say that what are the temperature variations. Next heading is the temperature variations, right? Uh, they are already noted down from this figure 3 and 4 respectively. However, the average everyday temperature shall be 32 degrees centigrade anywhere in the country except in the regions experiencing minimum temperature of -5 degrees centigrade or lower, right? However, where everyday temperature may be taken as 15 degrees centigrade or as specified by the power utilities, right? Right, that is how the average everyday temperature shall be taken as 32 degrees centigrade in the normal regions, whereas that shall be taken as uh, minus shall be taken as 15 degrees centigrade, which are experiencing a minimum temperature of -5 degree or lower. Everyday temperature shall be taken as 15 degrees centigrade, right? That is how the average everyday temperatures, either 32 degrees or 15 degrees centigrade respectively, right? And the maximum conductor temperature may be obtained after allowing an increase in temperature due to radiation and as well as heating effect, that I already told, right? These are carrying heavy voltages, therefore they are under heavy heating effects, as well as due to sun. Even they are now even they are having the temperatures, sun temperature, as well as they are carrying heavy voltages, therefore the temperature is within that. Even sun is also giving rise to change in temperature, right? Diurnal temperatures. Even third one is they are also carrying the temperatures, means this electric cables will be having the magnetic flux around that. Therefore, because of that magnetic flux, there is a radiation effect, right? Therefore, that in put together, absolute maximum now the code says that the tower may be designed to suit the conductor temperatures of 75 degrees centigrade for ACSR, aluminium, copper, steel, uh, uh, power conductors, right? Whereas 85 degrees centigrade maximum mm, uh, for aluminum alloy conductors. However, the maximum temperature of the ground wire exposed to sun may be taken as 53 degree centigrade. Right now, next one is the sag tension. Student, just now we have explained what is sag. Because of that tension, as per this IS 5613, 100% is designed wind pressure after accounting the drag coefficient and gust response factor at everyday temperature, whereas it should be taken as 36% of the design wind pressure after accounting the drag and etc. Response gust response factor at minimum temperature. If you are taking into account minimum temperature 36%, if you are taking everyday average temperature 100%, right, should be the sag tension, right? These will see in the designs, right? Once we take the loads, the temperature as well as wind effect, student, now I'll move to the loads, right? Like this, right? Now the first one is the loads on the towers, right? We do have one moment, right? We do have the three types of loads. The climatic loads related to reliability requirements. The second one is the failure containment loads related to security requirements, and as well as the third one is maintenance loads pertaining to the safety requirements. What are the different definitions of these reliability as well as security and safety we have seen at the starting of these discussions, right? These climatic loads are the random loads that are imposed on the towers or insulated strings or conductors or the ground wire due to the action of wind on transmission line and do not do not act continuously. These won't act continuously, right? That is how they shall be taken either following as follows, right? Whichever is more, 100% is design wind pressure at everyday temperature, as we have discussed in the previous case, and as well as 36% wind pressure at minimum temperatures, right? As you have seen in the previous case, right? That is how. Now, next one is the failure containment loads. These loads comprises of anti-cascading loads as well as torsional and longitudinal loads, right? Now, anti-cascading loads may be caused by the failure of the items such as insulators, hardware, joint failures, and major component failures such as towers, foundations, conductors due to defective materials or workmanship from the climatic overloads, or sometimes even casual events or such misadventures, means aircraft crashes, right? As we have seen in the case of WTO towers, right? Or avalanches or sabotage, etc. All these will be taken care in the anti cascading loads, means sorry, cascading loads, right? Therefore they will be covered under anti cascading loads, right? Therefore these are what called the cascading failures, right? Means the catastrophic failure will be there in such case, right? Without any giving due notification, any without any giving due notification, they will be failing, right? Therefore the next loads are the torsional and longitudinal loads. I already explained in the previous subheading student what are the longitudinal and transverse and torsional loads. You just refer back to that, right? These are due to breakage of the power conductors or that of the ground wires, which I already explained in the previous subheadings, right? And these may also be due to the mechanical tension of the power conductors or ground wires uh, corresponding to 100% is design wind pressure or 36% at minimum temperature. This we already know, right? Next, third type of load is construction or maintenance loads. These are imposed on the tower during the construction or maintenance of the transmission line towers, right? Now, once I know that now how to calculate uh, loads, right? The computation of loads, right? Now this is how the first one is the transverse loads for reliability requirements shall be calculated like this. These loads shall be calculated as far as wind action on the tower structure or conductors or ground wires or insulator or strings computed according to 9.1 or 9.2 or 9.3 respectively, uh, are for both climatic conditions as specified in 11.2, are components of the mechanical tension FWD of conductor and ground wire due to wind computed as per this 11.3.2.1, right? That is how these reliability requirement loads shall be taken care. Given by this formula, total transverse load as 1 plus 2 means WFWT transverse load as well as that of the conductor loads, right? Plus FWI insulator loads as well as FWD, right? Right? FWC, FW1 and FWD are applied on the conductor. C for conductors or ground wires, right? And uh, T for towers T for towers and I for insulators respectively, right? That is how the total transverse load shall be taken as summation of 1 and 2, which is given by this formula FWT plus FWC plus FWI plus FWD. Whereas from security requirements point of view, these loads shall be taken as under on the suspension towers. The transverse load shall be due to wind action on the towers, conductors and ground wires or insulators shall be taken as nil. You need not take, right? Whereas the transverse loads due to line deviation shall be based on the components of the mechanical tension of conductors or ground wires corresponding to everyday temperatures, whereas it is taken as nil wind condition for working under working conditions, whereas for broken wire conditions the component shall be taken as 50% of the mechanical tension and 100% mechanical tension of ground wire at everyday temperature, and nil for wind wind no wind, right? That is how the for transverse loads on the suspension tower should be calculated, right? And for tension and dead end towers, the transverse loads due to wind action on tower structure, conductor, ground wire, etc. shall be calculated as per 12.11.1 as we have seen in the this FWT, FWC, FWI, FWD as discussed there. As 60% wind span shall be considered for broken wire conditions and 100% wind span considered intact span, means working condition or intact span condition 100%, whereas broken condition is 60%. And transverse load due to line deviation should be taken as 100% only as per this 11.3.2.1, right? Now also the loads due to the safety requirements, students, right? The transverse loads from safety requirement point of view on the tower structures or conductors and ground wires, insulators, etc. shall be taken as nil. No, you need not take. For normal and intact or normal working conditions as well as broken wire conditions, you need not take. However, now the code says that the transverse loads due to mechanical tension of conditions and ground wire at everyday temperature and no wind condition on account of the line deviation shall be taken for both normal and broken wire conditions. For this you need to take, right? Now let's come to the tough. Within this from safety requirement point of view, I do have generally the vertical loads first, right? Therefore this vertical load should be calculated for reliability, security and safety point of view. First, how these vertical loads will be calculated from reliability point of view. These loads due to weight of this conductors and weight conductors due to that weight span should be taken care. And the self-weight of the tower, I already explained in the previous case how the self-weight of the tower should be calculated, student, should be also considered, right? The next, from security point of view, this vertical load shall be calculated same as 12.2.1 as just now explained, due to the weight of the power conductor, ground wire, and 60% of the weight span. From security point of view, only 60% of the weight span, and that of the this self weight of the tower is same as discussed in the above this one, right? That you calculate as usual, right? And third one, from this vertical load from safety requirement point of view shall be one, the loads as computed in the 12.2.2 means the same coding specification, but a load of 1500 Newton or 150 kg, that I already explained, considered acting at each arm as provision of weight of lineman along with his tool. This already explained in the previous case also. 150 kg or 1500 newtons, or load of 3.5 kilonewton considered acting at the tip of the cross arms up to 220 kilovolt and 5 kilonewton for 400 kilovolt and higher voltage cases, and Also, the following erection loads at lifting points for 400 kilo voltage and higher voltage shall be assumed, acting at locations of the specified below, right? Like this, right? The tension in the tower, vertical load, and distance from the tip of the cross arm, right? For twin bundle conductors, the vertical load should be taken as 10 kilonewton. The distance from the tip of the cross arm shall be taken as acting at 0.6 meters or 600 mm. For multi-bundle conductors, it should be taken as 20 kilonewtons, acting at a distance of 1 meter, 1 meter. And all bracings and redundant members of the tower which are horizontal or inclined up to 15 degree from horizontal shall be designed to withstand an ultimate vertical load of 1.5 kilonewton or 150 kg, right? Considering all other loads, right? Now once I conclude that vertical load students, then I'll move to the longitudinal loads. Like this, vertical loads is now over. Now I'll move to longitudinal loads. I hope you are understanding the discussions, codal specification students, right? We are there in the longitudinal loads. From reliability point of view, these loads shall be taken as under longitudinal load for dead end towers shall be considered corresponding to mechanical tension of conductors and ground wire as specified in 11.3.1 that we already discussed. 11.3.1, right, in the previous subheading, like this, right? 11.3.1, right, this one, right? And cascading effect loads, right? 11.3.1 that you consider, right? And the longitudinal loads which might be caused on the tension towers by adjacent spans of unequal lengths can be neglected in most cases, right? And no longitudinal load for suspension and tension towers shall be considered. No longitudinal load for suspension towers and tension towers shall be considered from reliability point of view, right? From reliability point of view. Whereas from security point of view, security required load point of view, these loads shall be taken as under for suspension towers. The longitudinal loads corresponding to 50% of the mechanical tension of the power conductor or 100% of the mechanical tension of the ground wire shall be considered at everyday temperature and with no wind, right? And horizontal loads in longitudinal direction due to mechanical tension in the power conductors and ground wires as specified in 11.3.2.1 for power broken conditions also, whereas it shall be taken as the nil for intact wire conditions for tension towers, right? For dead end towers, the horizontal loads in the longitudinal direction due to mechanical tension of power conductors, ground wires, etc. shall be as per 11.3.2 for intact, means normal working conditions. However, for broken conditions, it should not be considered. It should be taken as nil. It should be taken as nil, right? Now, next one is the from safety point of view, these loads shall be considered for normal operating conditions. These loads for dead end towers shall be considered as corresponding to mechanical tension of conductors or ground wire at everyday temperature with no wind, right? However, longitudinal loads due to unequal spans may be neglected for normal operating conditions from safety point of view, whereas for power broken conditions, within that, for suspension towers, longitudinal loads for subconductor for subconductors and ground wire shall be considered as 10 kilonewtons and 5 kilonewtons respectively. Means for subconductors 10 kilonewtons and for ground wires it should be taken as 5 kilonewtons respectively. Whereas for tension towers, the longitudinal loads shall be taken as equal to twice the sagging tension, whereas the sagging tension is generally taken as 50% of the tension at everyday temperature with no load, right? For wires under stringing, whereas it shall be 1.5 times the sagging tension for intact wires. Stringing completed, no effect, right? Therefore, there is a for tension towers, whereas for Now, after seeing these, let us see the load combinations. I hope student you understood the discussions, the different vertical loads as well as longitudinal and transverse loads, right? Now these are the different loading combinations from reliability point of view, right? There is a transverse loads as per 12.1.1, vertical loads as per 12.2.1, longitudinal loads as per 12.3.1. Similarly, for security point of view, loading combination should be taken for transverse loads, vertical loads, and longitudinal loads, conforming to 12.1.2, 12.2, 12.3.2 respectively. Whereas from safety point of view also, the transverse loads as per 12.1.3, vertical loads as per 12.2.2 are vertical loads calculated even as per 12.2.3, 12.2.3, and longitudinal loads as per 12.3.3. That is how all these loaded combinations shall be considered for reliability and security and safety point of view. And even will have the checks for the anti-cascading effects also, right? The all angle towers shall be checked for following anti-cascading conditions with all conductors and ground wire intact, working conditions only on one side of the tower, only on one side, not on the other side. Even on the other side also, that will there, right? Transverse loads, these loads shall be taken as shall be taken under no wind condition, whereas vertical load shall be taken as some of the weight of conductor or ground wire as per weight span of intact conductor or ground wire, weight of insulator string and accessories. And third one is the longitudinal loads. These loads shall be taken as the pull of the conductors or ground wires at everyday temperature and no wind applied simultaneously at all points on one side with 0 degree deviation. Right. The tension limits are also specified for the conductors and ground wires at everyday temperatures. The initial unloaded tension shall be taken as 35% and final unloaded tension 25%, provided that ultimate tension under the everyday temperature and 100% is design wind pressure or minimum temperature is acting, and 36% design wind pressure does not exceed 70% of this ultimate tensile strength of this power conductor or ground wire. That is how the tension limits are specified. However, for 400 kilo voltage and 800 kilo voltage, the final unloaded tension of the conductors at everyday temperature shall be not exceeding 22% of this 22% of the ultimate tensile strength of the conductors and 20% of the ultimate tensile strength of the ground wire respectively, right? Now let us see this broken wire condition, student. This already discussed in the previous subheading also, right? This is how for single circuit towers, any one phase or ground wire broken, whichever is more stringent for a particular case. Whereas for double, triple circuit or quadruple circuit systems, right, for suspension towers, any one phase or one power conductor or one ground wire broken, whichever is very stringent. And for small or medium angle towers, any two phases or power conductors broken on the same side and same span, or one phase or one power conductor broken and one ground wire broken on same side on the same span, whichever out of these whichever combination is stringent on a particular member. And for large angle towers, tension towers and dead end towers, any three phases or three power conductors broken on the same side and same span and are any two power conductors or phases and one ground wire broken on the same side. Out of these two, whichever is stringent, that should be considered. And finally, the other specifications are like this: the strength and factor related to the quality. If the steel with minimum ground yield strength is used for fabrication of towers is estimated, loads shall be increased by a factor of 1.02. If the minimum guaranteed yield strength is not used, then you use a factor of safety of 1.05. That is how the factor of safeties, right? That is how the list of the referred Indian standards, other referred Indian standard student, right? That is how IS 801 part 1 student. Now I'll move to quickly IS 801 part 2, right? This is how IS 802 part 1 section 2 student, right? Which is the Indian standard use of structural steel in overhead transmission line towers, code of practice, section 2, permissible stresses. I hope student you are understanding. We are there in IS 802 part 1 section 2. So far we have discussed IS 802 part 1 section 1, right? Now we are there in section 2, which deals with the permissible stresses, right? Let us go quickly with the permissible stresses, students, right? This you already seen, the conductors, the tensions, right? This you already noted from part 1 also. Initial unloaded tension 35 percentage and final unloaded tension 25%. Just now we have discussed that, right? And the permissible stresses, axial stresses in the tension shall not exceed Fy, right? The estimated tensile stress on the net effective sectional area should not exceed Fy, where Fy is the minimum guaranteed yield stress. That is how the tension is based upon the minimum guaranteed yield stress of the material, right? As per this section 9, we'll see that, right? And axial stresses in compression shall be calculated like this. The allowable unit stress or axial stress in compression, FA, in megapascals on cross-sectional areas of the axially loaded compression member shall be calculated like this. FA is equal to 1 minus half KL by R, stiffness ratio by CC whole square multiplied by Fy. For stiffness ratio, KL by R less than or equal to CC, right? Whereas if this KL by R is greater than CC, then this Fa is given by pi square E divided by lambda square KL by R, right? Where CC is a value given by pi square root of under root 2E divided by Fy, where E is the Young's modulus and Fy is the minimum guaranteed yield stress in MPa, and E is the Young's modulus of the steel. By default, it is 2 into 10 to the power 5, and KL by R is the largest slenderness ratio, effective slenderness ratio of the unbraced segment of the member. L is the unbraced length of that compression member, and R is the appropriate radius of gyration, or RUU, or generally RVV as appropriate, right? Either RUU or RVV, generally RVV, about minor axis by default, right? Then the however, the formula given above is applicable provided the largest width to thickness ratio B by T is not more than 210 divided by square root of Fy, where B is the distance of the edge of the fillet to extreme fiber in mm, where T is the thickness of the flange. However, if this ratio is exceeded, then this Fy shall be replaced with FCR, critical stress, right? Previously it was yield stress, now this is critical stress, FCR, given by this formula. If B by T is greater than B by T limiting, just now we have seen B by T limiting is 210 divided by square root of Fy, and less than or equal to 378 divided by square root of Fy, if this condition is satisfied, then FCR, critical stress, is given by 1.677 minus 0.677 BT divided by BT limiting multiplied by Fy. Whereas if that B by T is greater than 378 divided by square root of Fy, then FCR, critical stress, is given by 65,550 divided by B by T, right? Then next one is stresses in the bolt, students, right? These should be conforming to these codes, IS 6639 12427 or 3575 for the bolts, and IS 4000 respectively, right? And the ultimate stresses in the bolts in MPa as per this table 1 are like this, right? For shear, the permissible stresses in the bolts, right? Bolts for 4.6 class bolts in shear shear on gross areas, it is 218, whereas for 5.6 class bolts it is 310, right? 310. Like that, for bearing, stress on gross diameter of the bolt, for 4.6 it is 436, for 5.6 it is 620. For the tension, axial tension, tensile stress, for 4.6 it is 194, and for 5.6 grade bolt it is 250. This is how the ultimate stresses in the bolts in MPa. Even the slenderness ratios are also given for how the slenderness ratio shall be considered for compression members as well as for redundant members shall be decided like this, right? Type of the member: compression member, leg section are joint members bolted in both faces at connections for slenderness ratio greater than 0 and less than or equal to 120. Then that value of KL by R, effective slenderness ratio itself, is L by R, right? Likewise, members with concentric loading at both ends of the unsupported panel with L by R greater than 0, less than 120, it is L by R. Like that, members with concentric loading at one end and normal framing eccentricity at other end of unsupported panel with L by R 0 greater than 0 and less than 120, it should be taken as 30 plus 0.75 LR. For members with normal framing eccentricity at both ends of unsupported panel, for slenderness ratio greater than 0, less than 120, it should be taken as 60 plus 0.5 L by R. And members unrestrained against rotation at both ends of unsupported panel, for L by R greater than 120 and less than 200, it should be taken as L 200. For members partially restrained against rotation at end of unsupported panel, for L by R greater than 120, less than or equal to 250, it should be taken as 28.6 0.762 L by R. For members partially restrained against rotation at both ends of unsupported panel, for L by R greater than 120, less than or equal to 250, it should be taken as 46.2 plus 0.615 L by R. And for redundant members, for L by R greater than 0 and less than 250, it should be taken as 250. That is how the slenderness ratio shall be considered, right? And even we do have the slenderness ratio limiting values as follows, right? For leg members, ground wire peak members, and lowest members of the cross arms in compression, the maximum slenderness ratio is 120, and other members carrying compression computed stresses 200, redundant members carrying nominal stresses 250, right? And however, the slenderness ratio of a member carrying axial tension only, that slenderness ratio may be taken up to 400, right? And even now let us move to the minimum thickness of the member students. I hope students you are understanding the discussions. The minimum thickness of galvanized and painted tower members shall be taken like this, right? Minimum thickness, right? Minimum thickness 1 for leg members, right? And ground wire peak members and lower members of the cross arms in compression. For galvanized members it should be 5, for painted members it should be 6, whereas for other members it should be 4 and 5 respectively for galvanized and painted members, right? And however, the gusset plates should be designed as per the shear or direct stresses or flexural stresses point of view only. That will govern the design. However, in the minimum thickness of the gusset plate should be 2 mm more than that required, more than a lattice member to which it is connected. In case when that lattice is directly connected to the gusset outside the leg member. However, in any case, the gusset plate should not be less than 5 mm thick. And now let us move to the next subheading, right? As the net sectional area for tension members, right? However, we already know that once we do have the holes in the member students. Obviously, if this member is under tension, then the net sectional area in tension will reduce by these holes, right? Whole areas. Therefore, how much of fraction of this part, x fraction, right? If at all it is a straight or diagonal or zigzag line across that member, then that fraction part x is equal given by 1 minus p square divided by 4gd, where p is a longitudinal spacing or staggering, right? That is the distance between the two successive holes, right? That is how, right? Two successive holes, right? That is how the pitch, right? And g is the transverse distance, or it is a gauge actually, right? The gauge, right? The gauge, right, is the distance between the same between the same two consecutive holes, right? Gauge, right? That is how the gauge, right? And uh, d is the diameter of the hole, right? Therefore, using this, now we can calculate what is x, and put all the holes in opposite legs of the angles. The value of the g should be taken as the sum of the gauges from back of the angle less the thickness of the angles minus the thickness of the angles, right? Then once you understood that, let us see what is that net effective area of the angle in tension, right? Now, if at all the single angle, this is how the single angle connected to one side of a gusset plate, student, like this gusset plate, then right, this is how then the effective sectional area, effective cross section of this is now given by a1 plus a2k, where a1 is the effective sectional area, effective sectional, like this. One moment, right? Effective sectional area of the connected leg, right? Of this connected leg to this gusset plate. This is a gusset plate, right? Connected leg. And a2 is the gross cross sectional area of this unconnected leg. This is what called unconnected or outstanding leg. Therefore, if at all this single angle connected to through one leg on one side of a gusset plate only, then even as per IS 800 1984 old code, right, we have this formula K 3a1 divided by a1 plus a2, whereas a pair of angles back to back in tension are connected by one leg on each side of the angle, right? Like this, right? Back to back, two angles back to back, or two angles connected back to back on one side of a gusset plate only. Then in such a case a1 plus a2k, where k is given by 5a1 divided by a1 plus a2, a1 5a1 divided by a1 plus a2, right? That is how we can calculate the net tension areas, right? Then once we see those specifications, let us move to the bolts. The minimum diameter of the bolts should be 12 mm, right? And the preferred sizes should be 12, 16 and 20 mm only, right? 12, 16, 20 mm only. And the length of the bolts shall be such that the threaded portion does not lie in the plane of the contact of the members, and the projected portion of the bolt beyond the nut should be in the range of 3 to 8 mm, right? 3 to 8 mm only, right? That much of only protrusion should be there. And the gross area of the bolts should be taken as d multiplied by t, where d is the nominal diameter of that bolt and t is the thickness of the thinnest part of that joint to which it is connected, right? That is how the second part 1 2 second section, student, right? Even the examples of determination of the standard ratios for different members, right? A leg member using unsymmetrical bracing, that is how they are given. You may just go through this coded specification, students, I think, right? I'll just go through at a quicker pace. That is how, right? That is how you may just go through at a quicker pace on your own. I'll not explain now. right? Even for X bracings with and without secondary members also, standard ratio, the critical values, right? ABR divided by R, etc. are given, right? That is a different for K bracings. These are now shown with and without secondary bracings, right? That is all the second part, right? Now I'll move at a quicker pace. The third part, right? This is how IS 802 part 2, which is the code of practice for use of structural steel in overhead transmission line towers. Right? Part 2 means fabrication, galvanizing, inspection, and packing. Right? I think how the shop drawing should be prepared and how the bill of the material should be done and how the fabrications, right? These specifications are given, material quality control, right? And operations in fabrication, how the straightening should be done and how cutting and bending should be done. They are now specified here. The maximum bend angle should not be more than 15 degrees for all the plates up to 12 mm thick, right? That is how uh, they are now specified, and greater bends and other thickness shall not be bent hard. They should not be bent hard, right? And how the punching, holing should be done and how punching should be done is explained, and how the fasteners and joints should be there, and bolts, what should the diameters of the bolts, 12, 16, 20, etc. And uh, the hole diameters should be generally the diameter of the hole plus 1.5 overall diameter of that hole, and how the spacing of the bolts and edge distances, they are now given like this, right? For bolt diameter 12, right? Hole diameter, right? 12 plus 1.5 means 13.5. Bolt spacing should be 32, and edge distance is generally 1.5 multiplied by the d. D is equal to 12, right? Say it is 16, and hole center to shear or flame cut edge, then it is 20, right? It is 20, right? That is how for 16 mm and 20 mm diameters also, bolts also, the values are given in this table 1, spacing of bolts and edge distances, right? And the locking devices are also specified. Spring washers of the positive lock of the following thicknesses should be used for 12 mm, right? Thickness of the spring washer should be 2.5, for 16 it is 3.5, and 12 for 20 it is 4 mm thick. Spring washer should be used, and bolt gauge distances for flanges as angles as specified in table 31 of SP 61 1969, XP 61 1969. And what should the tolerances, they are now specified, right? The tolerances 0.08 plus or minus 0.5, tolerances cumulative between the consecutive holes should be plus or minus 0.5, right? For the members it should be plus or minus 1.5, and the gauge distances should be plus or minus 0.5, etc., right? Whereas the tolerance, cumulative tolerance between the consecutive holes should be plus or minus 0.5 only. How the marking should be done, right? Marking, the marking dice of 16 mm size, right? How the marking should be done, and about the sharp erections and how the painting and galvanizing should be done. You please refer to this code, right? And how the inspection should be done, how the inspections should be done, and how the packings using this angle sections, cleat angle sections, and bolts, nuts, washers, how the packing should be done is referred in this IS 802 part 2. Now I'll move to the last code, which is IS 802 part 3 1978 code of practice of structural steel in overhead transmission line towers, part 3, testing, right? Testing, right? Now let us see this this second part, student, right? This is how the testing should be done, right? This is specified here, right? There is the scope, general, how the calibration should be done, and how the measurement measuring in calibration of the measuring instrument should be done. This given here. Method of load applications, how the load should be applied for testing, and load and deflection measurements, how it should be done, right? And testing procedures, right? Bolt slip tests, how it should be done, for kept constant at every 2 minutes, right? And normal load broken wire condition load test for 25 to 100%, 25, 50, 75 dash 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 up to 100%. And how the what should the observation periods, right? It says that for every 5 minutes after it is loaded up to 100% ultimate load, right? That is how the recording should be done, and how the distraction tests, right? Distraction test shall be carried out, and check for mechanical strength of the tower using load tests for every 5 minutes stipulated time, right? And material test, how they should be specified, and the procedure for repetition of tests in the event of premature failures, how the test report should be written. That is also specified here, right? In this format, right? And what should the format of the test is given here, right? That is how the different IS 802 codal specification, students, right? I hope, student, you understood these discussions on the transmission line towers. In today's class we have seen the discussions on the transmission line towers, right? In general, what are the different loads, in particular the classification of the towers as per IS 802, as well as general classification, and what are the different loads and load combinations, and how the loads should be taken care as per IS 802 part 1 section 1, part 1 section 2, part 2 and part 3, right? The different stresses like this, right? In the next class we shall see a numeric problem with these explanations, right? Okay, students, then we'll now conclude the discussions. If you like the discussions what we had in today's class on transmission line towers, you just try to click like, share and subscribe to our YouTube channel, as well as you comment and turn on notifications, right? We'll meet in the next class with another discussion on the transmission line tower with a numeric problem. Till then, bye bye, students.